Thank you so much for joining me today on Just Praise Him Radio. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and my job is to inspire you to a closer walk with Christ. Now here's the show. Hello, believers. Welcome to the Just Praise Him radio program. I'm your host, Glenda Lomax, and the title of my message today is The False Promotion Test. The false promotion test has to do with the wilderness. So let me read you some stuff from the wilderness so I can give you the foundation of this, because I really want y'all to get this. This is very important. It's the first time I've ever seen it. In Numbers 13, Moses sent 12 men, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, into the Promised Land to spy it out before leading the Israelites in. They were instructed to find out, were there a lot of people there or only a few? Is there wood? Did the people there live in strong cities, or did they live in tents? And what kind of people live there? And they came back 40 days later. And they told him and said, "We came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it." They brought back big grapes. "Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan." Now see, these were all the ites people were people that were enemies to Israel apparently at the time. "And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said," because Caleb was one of the spies, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature." So they're giants in the land, and they'll just eat us up if we go into the land, is what they're saying. So to summarize, they said, there's food there, and look at these big grapes, but we can't take it. We're not strong enough. Immediately, fear and doubt entered into the heart of the Israelites, whom God had sustained through the entire 40 years in the desert, much of it in the wilderness of Paran. Now, I was researching about Paran. A site about biblical places calls the wilderness of Paran a vast and dreadful desert. The Paran Plateau, this is a quote, "contains a lot of gravel because with a lack of rain, there is no soil formation. If any soil is formed, the wind blows it off." End quote. In Paran, from the research I did, it appears the average daily temperature in the daytime was near 100 degrees. In the Negev, where they also spent some time, the average daily temps in the summer was 115 in June. How would you like to walk through that? So it's about 10 degrees higher than in Texas in summer. Now let's keep in mind they were walking in the desert over rocky ground which holds heat, which is like walking on a sidewalk in Texas. I used to take my dogs for a walk every evening in Texas. And in Texas, the heat blazes down during the day in summer. I mean, you can look at the trees and they look like they're wilting because of the heat. In the evenings, it's still hot. And the reason that you feel like you're in an oven is because you have the sun blazing down on you from above and the accumulated heat from the road or sidewalk coming up at you from underneath because it's still hot. So you're caught between two heat sources. And that makes most people sweat like a pig, honestly. So the Israelites were walking in the desert where the sand there reflects heat on rocky ground which holds heat and under the blazing sun. So they were in a lot of pressure, okay, under a lot of pressure. When they first followed Moses into the desert from Egypt, they walked 3 days before they found water. I couldn't last one day in Texas in the heat without water, y'all. Not one day. The heat makes you sweat and you dehydrate really fast, and then you get a migraine level headache that is just miserable beyond words, and it is very, very dangerous. Every Texan knows to avoid that. So I don't think any of us has the right to look down on the Israelites when they complained that, they wanted water after 3 days of walking in the blazing desert heat. So I just wanted to give you that background. Here they are at the Jordan River. They're about to cross over into the Promised Land. They have walked in this desert in these conditions for 40 years. If they were 10 years old when they walked in, they're now 50 years old. That's a big chunk of your life. 40 years is huge. I would venture to say that they were ready to move on to something a bit easier, and who could blame them? Walking hour after hour across rocky ground in the heat, that's sure not my idea of a good time. So now they finally reach the border to the Promised Land, where they're going to get to go in and have, a normal life and live in a normal house, and everything's going to be okay again. They must have been so relieved. And the spies said, and they told him, we went into the land where you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey, and look at these big grapes, there's fruit there, but the men are giants, and we can't take it. So, and all our enemies live there and all that. So now, today, we have the whole Bible to read, so we can look back and see all the miracles that God did for the Israelites in those 40 years in the desert. Not the least of which was the parting of the Red Sea so they could get away from Pharaoh's army that was charging after them. If you're anywhere near a beach, you go stand on that beach and you look out at that ocean and you imagine God pushing up the ocean on both sides of you so you can walk across on dry land. Think about that, what that would take. But the Red Sea was 40 years ago, and they're not thinking about that right now. And besides, what if God changed his mind? What if that time he did a miracle for them, but this time he won't because they complained and they worshiped the golden calf and whatever? Maybe this is a trick and he's leading them to slaughter. Now, we know that the Lord is not that way, but they did not have the Bible to get to know him through. They did not have the chance to learn about his character like we do. And I'll tell you something. I remember being in the wilderness of 2009 and thinking, yeah, God did a miracle for me, whenever, months ago, but what if this time he don't do one? What if this, what if he's going I'm going to have to go through something, worse. They could not approach the very throne of God in prayer like we can, y'all. The Israelites they were not taught to go. The veil was not torn down by Jesus. They couldn't just approach God. They would get killed if they approached God. Only the priests were allowed to approach God. I used to think, how could they be afraid, after he did all those miracles in the desert until that one wilderness? And I found myself doing exactly the same thing, doubting and fearing in the face of challenge. Our behavior in the wilderness is how we behave under extreme stress. Okay, God's showing us that. When you are under extreme stress, all the guard comes down, all the pretense comes down, right? All your preconceived notions comes down, and when you're in a severe financial wilderness, you just go straight into survival mode. So all that falls away, and what comes out is who you really are. And that is precisely what God's trying to show you. He's trying to show you that, and he's trying to show you that when you are in need, you don't know him well enough to know how to get what you need. And that's why he keeps taking you back, so you can get to know him well enough to get what you need in the wilderness. So the Israelites were under the extreme stress of walking through places that were honestly not made for walking, and doing without, their usual provision, and they didn't have their houses to live in. And, like when we go into the wilderness, you're under extreme stress. You're walking through places that are not made for walking. Nothing's going according to your plan. You're doing without your usual finances and provision. Sometimes you have to live with people you don't even want to be around, much less live with. And all the while, you just want your life back. And that's how they were. They just wanted their life back, even if it meant the life of a slave, So I want to tell you today about a new revelation I got this past weekend. I was thinking about a situation that happened to me and has been happening to me, where somebody has been just running their mouth about me, and they keep trying to damage my reputation when I didn't do anything bad to them at all. In fact, I was very kind to them and very generous towards them. But this person has turned on me the same way a Jezebel spirit turns on you, and attacked me quite viciously. So I was praying and just talking to the Lord about what happened and trying to understand, because I have a hard time understanding meanness when I've not done anything to harm that person. And I realized suddenly that this person had just been promoted and had fallen from that promotion, and that's when I saw it. Okay, so we're with the Israelites in the desert. They've just come up to the river Jordan, and Moses has sent a company into the land beyond to see what kind of people and provision are in the land. He knows they can take it because God already gave it to them, but they don't know that yet. They've been walking 40 years in that desert. That's 14,600 days in the blazing heat. Now they're finally about to go in. And the spies come back with a bad report, except for 2 of them. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people began to cry out that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron. That's a bad idea to talk about God's people, y'all. It's a real bad idea. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And therefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey. Were it not better for us to return to Egypt? And they even talked to each other. They started to make their own plan. They said, let's just pick somebody and let's go back to Egypt. Somebody to guide us. We're going to go back to Egypt. And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces and started interceding for the people. And God said, I'm going to kill them. And Moses said, don't do it, Lord. It's going to make you look bad. And God said, because I showed him my glory. I did all these miracles for him, And anyway, Moses and Aaron interceded. And God gave in, and he said, I'm not going to kill Caleb and Joshua. I'm going to save them because they're good. They did the right thing. And he said, tomorrow turn you and get you into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. And Moses said, why me? Why me, Lord? Why do I have to take care of all these people? Because he'd just done 40 years. He was looking forward to getting out too. Do you see what happened there? The people, after 40 years of witnessing miracles, albeit during intense hardship, still did not choose to believe God and obey him. So he sent them back out into the desert for another 40 years, where all the ones who originally crossed the Red Sea, as he held it back for them, died. Okay, so I'm praying and I'm talking to the Lord about this person who's been viciously attacking me for months now. And then I saw what in that person's life paralleled the Israelites. When the Israelites came up to the Jordan River and refused to believe and obey and cross over, that was no surprise to God. He wasn't sitting up in heaven going, oh no, what do I do now? They won't cross over. My plan is ruined. It's ruined. Can I just tell you something? And the Lord is saying, this is a word for somebody. God is not surprised by anything you have done. Nothing we do surprises him. He's God. He knows the past, he knows the present, and he knows the future. We're the ones who don't know. He knows all of it. So God knew the Israelites were going to rebel at the River Jordan. And I think he planned it this way. And here's why. For 40 years, this person that's been viciously attacking me had come out of 10 years in the wilderness, according to them. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. For 40 years, God had tried to teach them to obey and not to complain. For 40 years, he had shown them he is God. For 40 years, he had shown them he could provide where there was no provision and guide them where there was no path. He taught them over and over and over and over and over for 40 long years. God is very long-suffering, y'all. But he does eventually reach a point where he's done. And they still didn't get it. They still rebelled, and they still refused to obey him and go in and take the land. I think their approach to the River Jordan, when he led them there, because remember, every move they made in the wilderness, God said, go this way, go this way. He led them with the pillar of cloud during the day and the pillar of fire at night. I think that was a false promotion, because here they are at the Jordan. Now they think their trial is over and they're okay. They're getting what they want. And they still won't obey him. Do you see that? They're fixing to get into the promised land. They're going to get everything he promised. And they still won't do what they're supposed to do. So the pressure was off. They were out of the wilderness. They were going into the promised land when this happened. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I'm coming out of a wilderness, I am really laid back and very, very thankful. Very thankful. I'm not criticizing them, but it seems like after 40 years of that desert, you would be willing to face just about anything to get out. It just seems that way. So I saw this false promotion thing, and I started thinking back in my own life And back in the early 2000s, I had this one job in a really nice part of Dallas. And I had been in a terrible, terrible wilderness, barely scraping by, and was working for an absolute tyrant, okay, when all this stuff happened. And I do not use that term lightly. I can get along with just about anybody. And I got along with this boss because I submitted to his authority, but I was not in agreement with him. But he was a greedy tyrant. And of course, I begged the Lord to deliver me out of that job. But this was during the time when the Silicon Prairie, or the tech boom in Dallas, had gone bust. There was a lot of tech jobs in that. Before, they called it Silicon Prairie because it was kind of like the like Silicon Valley in California, but it was in Texas. And it had gone, the boom went bust. People stood out in the streets with signs begging for jobs to feed their families so they wouldn't lose their homes. It was a terrible time economically. If you had a job, you clung to it by your fingernails, and you did anything that you had to do just about to hold on to that job, because there were no jobs. There were no jobs, y'all. It was like during the Great Recession, there just weren't any jobs to be had. So even though I hated every minute of every day working for that tyrant, I had a job, and I could at least pay my bills. I wasn't in the street. So it was a really horrible time economically. So I was just submitting to that boss, to his authority, and praying that things would get better, or God would bring me a better job, or lead me, or something. And one day, out of the blue, I got a phone call from an old friend offering me a job. Wow. It was like deliverance showed up at my doorstep, and I was over the moon with happiness. I felt so blessed. I was so happy to be getting out of there, so happy. Could not wait. The whole group that was hired, this person who hired me was opening a new office. And the whole group that was hired was treated to lunch at a fancy hotel in downtown Dallas. You know, we were photographed for a magazine down there, for a Dallas magazine, all this kind of stuff. We were just on top of the world. You know, this was all pretty heady stuff for all of us. So I left the job working for the tyrant and went to the new one, counting my blessings all along the way. In less than a month, it was very clear that things were not at all what they appeared to be. I had gone to work for Jezebel, y'all, and it was bad. And I mean really bad. I mean really bad. I've never worked for anyone who broke so many laws so blatantly. Although the boss before ran a pretty close second. And just as I had complained to all my friends all the way through the wilderness job working for the greedy tyrant, I now complained all the way through the job for the greedy tyrant Jezebel. Finally, after months of an intensity of stress at this job, it was just horrible, I became ill. And so I was off on medical leave, and I think it was about 4.5 months, something like that. During that time, I had major surgery. 2 of my family members died. I was in a financial wilderness because the disability paid less than, my job paid. But at least I had those. And I was so traumatized by the Jezebelic spirit that I had nightmares. I mean, it was bad. I was very, very traumatized. By this time, I had learned to recognize when I had been led back into the desert, and I knew that it meant he was trying to teach me and refine me in some way that I had resisted. I didn't mean to resist, but sometimes our flesh will fight God to hold on to a sin like pride when we don't realize that it's doing that. And so we're resisting him without realizing that we're resisting him. But as I pressed in and spent hours and hours in prayer and the Word, he began to show me the pridefulness that I was walking in. Talking about the bad bosses like that, I had been in pride. Bad-mouthing them as I had been was in pride. I was still submitting to their authority, so I thought I was okay. You see the difference there? Our behavior can be okay. God said this is a word for somebody. Your behavior, as mine was, can be okay, and your heart can still not be okay. Our behavior can be right and our heart can be wrong. So I was submitting to their authority, so I thought I was okay, but I wasn't. I was walking in pride. When you walk in pride, you're walking hand in hand with Satan. You are holding hands with the devil, and nothing in your life will really go right until you stop. Can I just tell you that? So I think now, looking back, that job for the Jezebel was a false promotion. because the Lord could not get me to stop complaining and running my mouth about the other boss when I was working for him. The boss I was bad-mouthing was not a Christian, and he was truly and y'all, I'm not kidding when I say greedy tyrant. I've never seen anything like that. His own father, who's a very sweet and very humble man, once walked up to me and said, he's the only one of my kids that turned out bad. And you can hear the sadness in that man's voice. How heartbreaking is that? And how sad is that? That was the only child he had that he could not be proud of. The Lord knew that I knew better than to be acting like that, but I kept on doing it anyway out of pride. And I was miserable, and women process everything verbally, y'all. I mean, we do, but that's not an excuse. It's our nature, but it's not supposed to be my nature because I'm a Christian. So I kept doing it anyway out of pride. When we call ourselves His, He is bound by His word to lead us on a course of correction when we disobey. He is our Father. And like any loving father, that doesn't just mean we get to call him daddy and get coddled by him. It means we also get corrected by him. Because he wants us to grow up and be like him. I believe the Lord showed me that first trip to the River Jordan was a false promotion test for the Israelites. It was a test to let the Israelites think they had arrived, to give them a chance to act better under less stress. Just like my new job was. We all flunked. I flunked really bad. I became ill and was off work for about 4 or 4.5 months and made the decision to never return to that job again. I found another position in the same company and just transferred. Every other person working in that office also left. Every single one of us was so traumatized. I think every single one of us left the industry, the whole industry, not just the job, but the whole industry, within about a year. Some people are just impossible to work for. But we know from all the words that the Lord has given us that we need to know His word, and we need to walk in more and more obedience every day to prepare for what is coming, to be able to avoid deception better in what is coming. There are a lot of things being developed behind the scenes that not everybody knows about. Like they've developed a magnetic wave that they can shoot at, I think, the back of your head, but they shoot it at your head that reduces your belief in God. I shared a link to a 2015 article about that on the JPH Facebook page today. Today's Monday, March 12th, 2018. And I've known about that for a while and find it extremely disturbing. I mean, think about that. Why are they experimenting with how to make people not believe in God? Why would they be experimenting with that at all? So there you have it. There are deceptions planned for the future that we cannot even comprehend, y'all. God has warned us about that. He has told us in His word that if He didn't cut short the time, no flesh could be saved at all, and even the very elect would be deceived. And I don't know exactly who the very elect are, but I would think that would be the people closest to Him or something, or the chosen ones, the Jewish, I don't know. But anyway, I wanted to do this podcast and share with you the revelation on the false promotion test to make you aware that when you've arrived, you might not really have arrived. It might just be another test. When I flunked the false promotion test, I became ill and ended up leaving that position for another one. And I pressed into God to find out why I was in the wilderness. And I eventually got out of that one. But it was not my last one because I still kept missing it on stuff. But if something like that happens to you, the thing to do is to turn and press into God. Spend time in prayer. Shut your mouth. Quit talking about people. Quit acting up. And give God a chance to speak to you. Because let me tell you something. You can't really hear God very well when you're running your mouth about somebody. And the worst people to run your mouth about are God's people. People that are working for God, doing His will. That's the worst people that you can talk bad about. So, the Israelites, when they flunked their false promotion test, were sent back to the wilderness to die there. And I think that was because He had already been trying to teach them for 40 years, and they were no closer to learning than when they first entered the desert. They were not repentant. And I don't know, that's what it looks like to me. It seems like He was still trying to teach them the same stuff 40 years later. They had already had this test before. Anyway, I hope that this podcast is a help to you. Do not let your guard down when you come out of the desert into a promotion. because it may not be what it appears to be. It may be a false promotion test to see if you're really ready to be promoted. Thanks for listening. Jesus bless you. Y'all have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Just Praise Him Radio. You can contact me by mail at my new address, JPH Inc., Glenda Lomax, P.O. Box 60, Glencoe, Arkansas 72539, or by email at jphtoday@gmail.com. JPH is not affiliated with any nonprofit organization, church, or denomination. Have you ever gone through a time in your life where suddenly it just felt like your whole life was falling apart? I call these experiences the wilderness experiences. Wilderness experiences are a time of great uncertainty and change. There are times when our faith is tried and refined. After many experiences, the Lord spoke to me to write the Wilderness Companion, which is a virtual roadmap through the desert times of your life. Find out why you've been led to the wilderness. Find out what the biggest hindrance is to receiving provision in the wilderness. Find out what the 7 temptations of the wilderness are. Drastically cut the time you spend in the wilderness by learning how to partner with the Lord instead of working against Him. Every Christian needs to read The Wilderness Companion. It's by Glenda Lomax, and it's available on Amazon.com or wingsofprophecy.com. Amazon.com, The Wilderness Companion by Glenda Lomax. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you love deeply? If you have, then you know being betrayed by someone you love can be a life-altering experience. What you may not know is that every Christian must pass the test of absolute betrayal at least once in their Christian walk if they want to go higher. No test hurts more or pulls more strongly on your emotions than when someone you love completely turns against you. Do you know how to pass this test? Through a revelation received from the Lord, I share the good news about why betrayal visits Christians and how to pass this test once and for all. Don't let your betrayal catch you by surprise. Get the Judas Test on Amazon.com in print and Kindle versions. The Judas Test. Are there areas of your life you just can't seem to overcome in, no matter what you try? Are you plagued by depression, poverty, anger, lust, or failure? Do you recognize your predisposition to commit the same sins committed by your forefathers? Do you want a better life? Many people live their whole lives under generational and other types of curses without understanding they can be free. Learn what the scriptures say about curses and why they are still relevant today. Learn how to defeat every one of them through the power of the cross of Jesus Christ. Hosea 4:6 says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." You can break the curses off your life and start experiencing breakthroughs like never before. Read about different types of curses and how to break them, including anger, a curse that causes angry outbursts in constant anger. Barrenness, a curse that causes miscarriages and prevents pregnancies. Fear, a curse that brings a plague of fear and anxiety. Illegitimacy, a curse that causes lust, rebellion, and sexual dysfunction. Get the book, Loosed from Chains of Darkness, Destroying Curses Through the Power of the Cross. Available now on Amazon.com, in print and Kindle. Loosed from Chains of Darkness, and be free.